Okay, I imagine that we may have reached a level where folks have joined us here on the Zoom call for the evening. My name is Rick Deadweiler. I'll be moderating this fantastic and amazing panel of folks tonight as we're scheduled and plan to have real conversation, a real talk with the Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative. Before we get started and allowing our panelists to introduce themselves, I would just want to say that tonight we're really excited to be here to talk about, equity, racial justice, and many of the issues that we've been facing here, not only in our country, but certainly right here in Delaware. The folks that we have on this call today and in this webinar represent a wide cross section of our community, both business, education, youth leadership, private consultancy. And a big part of all that underscores this, as you'll see behind our backdrop, is the United Way. Everyone, we have that in common, that we all have an interest in working closely with the United Way. And we understand, as you'll see through this conversation, that yes, we're all in this together. So as we lean into this conversation, I certainly want to point to all of our panelists. We have Shelly Checkett, Clifton Howe. We have Jaylen Powell with us, Calvin Christopher, Patrick McCrumman, Toriah Highland, and Jacob Higgins. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you all for joining us today. And before we get started, I'll allow our panelists to introduce ourselves. And first, we'll get started with Shelly. Shelly, would you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so my name is Shelly Checkett. I'm the executive director of the Greater Kent Committee, which is a group of about 100 CEOs and business leaders in central Delaware. We have been a part of this collaboration for probably over a year now, and I am thrilled to be a part of the initiative. Some of the projects that we've worked on in the past is the creation of the Kent County Regional Sports Complex and the creation of the Sendell Foundation building in downtown Dover. So my organization is always looking for ways to get involved in what comes next. This is an obvious thing that's critical to our community. And so we're happy to be a partner with so many great people.
Fantastic. Shelly, thank you for joining us tonight. Next, we'll move over to Clifton Howe. Cliff, you mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
So good evening, everybody. I'd like to first start off by saying, first and foremost, I am a community activist. I've been a community activist since I was a sophomore in high school. Currently, I am the Equity and Diversity Coordinator for the Caesar Rodney School District. I am also a consultant for Clifton Howe Consulting, and I am the educational chair for the subcommittee of the DRJC.
Fantastic. Thanks, Cliff. I appreciate you joining us as well. Now we'll move over to Jaylen Powell. Jaylen, share a little bit about yourself. Tell us what you've been working on.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jaylen Powell, the CEO of Out Loud LLC, where we assist organizations with programming, facilitation, and training in areas of advocacy. We stand on 3 platforms, which is engagement, empowerment, and education. I also serve as one of the youth co-leads for United Way of Delaware and their Racial Justice Collaborative. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here, Jaylen. I will move over to Jacob Higgins. Jacob, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jacob Higgins. I'm a public ally who is partnered with United Way of Delaware. At the United Way, I support and am a member of all of the Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative work streams. And I'm just so passionate about the work of the DRJC because I decided that I want to myself get off the sidelines and be a part of racial justice and systemic change.
Fantastic. And I'm excited to have been working with you, Jacob. You're doing a great job with the collaborative. So next we'll move over to Toriah Highland. Toriah, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Toriah Highland. I'm a senior in high school in St. George's Technical High School, and I'm also a part of the youth work stream of DRJC. I am also responsible for spearheading a lot of change within my school district and within the state of Delaware regarding education equity. I have co-founded the Delaware Black Student Coalition, which is a coalition consisting of Black student leaders across the state of Delaware, and I'm a part of a plethora of other advocacy organizations. And in all, I'm just really passionate about mobilizing youth student leaders and fighting against systemic racism.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad you could join us, Taraya. Next, we'll go to Pat Mccrumman. Pat, my colleague in both philanthropy and community. Good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Rick. I'm Pat Mccrumman. I lead community and social impact for DuPont. My role is, I'm blessed to have this role because I believe that the private sector has a lot to bring to this, to the overall issues and the overall community development in Delaware. We are a founding member of the United Way back in 1946. So we've been a partner for a very long time, as Rick well knows. And this is something that I think is near and dear to the hearts and minds of a lot of the people at DuPont, including our volunteer workforce who is on the ground and doing a lot of great community work. And we're passionate about this as well and happy to be here tonight. Thanks, Rick.
Absolutely, Pat. And I'm glad you could join us. I know you're a busy time for us all, but I'm glad you're here and you've been doing some great work. And next, certainly last for the introductions, but not least, we're going to go to Calvin Christopher, again, a great friend and a longtime advocate and person who's been heavily engaged in our Delaware community. Calvin?
Thank you, Rick, and good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Calvin Christopher. Currently, I do some HR consulting for a minority CPA firm in Philadelphia. I was introduced to the collaborative when I was serving as a chairman of the Delaware Human Relations Commission, state agency that is enforces the fair housing laws and laws of equal accommodation. And it's through those experiences where you see and witness the treatment of so many people, and to see how we can come together on a collaborative basis and the power that we're able to do that, of which you're going to find out more about later on as we have our conversation. So that's just a little bit about me. Thank you, Rick.
Fantastic. And Calvin, it's great to have you with us. Always a great and wise counsel, and it's good to have you on board and helping to lead this effort with the Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative. Again, and my name is Rick Dedweiler. I'm a long-time proud and native Delawarean, grew up right here on the north side of Wilmington between Concord Avenue and Dana Boulevard, right off of 28th, and have for a very long time worked to serve my community with the long-standing purpose of really looking to make a difference. I've had the great opportunity, quite honestly, to serve in corporate affairs, community relations, philanthropy, roles for the state's largest and most prominent organization. And now I'm currently serving as the U.S. Eastern Region leader for Corteva AgriScience, and I lead all of our government and industry affairs. Additionally, I focus on corporate affairs and issues right here in the company's headquarters community of Delaware. And as of recent, certainly I serve on a number of impactful boards for organizations making a difference in Delaware. I am a co-chair of the United Way and currently serving as the co-chair of the Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative's Public Policy Committee. Really exciting work that we've been up to. And as we start to talk about the Racial Justice Collaborative, let me talk about, give you a little bit of grounding on what the organization is and kind of how we came to be, I guess, receiving this new and enthusiastic energy. And like you, many of our participants and audience today, we've all been working to navigate and do our best to remain safe and keep our families out of harm's way with this health pandemic. And simultaneous to us all being at home and held captive to our homes, we were all witness to the unfortunate truths with regard to racism, equality, and the horrific images and news reports of the murder and deaths of a number of African Americans in our community. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery over the past year, and there are countless others through the last spring. And while racism is not new and has a long-standing history and dark history in our country, Delaware is no different. And these recent high-profile events caused us all to pause and reflect and consider racial equity and social justice issues faced by Americans and even our Black and brown friends, neighbors, and colleagues. The Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative, the DRJC as we call it affectionately, while an established organization for some time, has received some significant and renewed enthusiasm to pursue this extremely important work in the pursuit. And the goal is very targeted and very specific: to eliminate policies and practices that enable systemic racism. And another goal is to replace them with those policies that achieve and sustain equitable opportunities and outcomes for all. There's a number of work streams that have been operating for the past 10 months or so. Those work streams include wealth creation, education, law enforcement, health equity, and one that we've been really excited about is youth development, making sure that we're developing the next generation of leaders, those folks that have really played a strong role in the advocacy work and the protest work and really raising their voices to work to address this issue. So with that said, the DRJC, we're going to have a conversation tonight. We're going to talk about the issues that we're facing, and we're really looking to hear your perspectives and your views. And while we're having this conversation, I would also like to point to the fact that on your screen, you should see a question and answer chat, Q&A. Please, if you have any questions, any thoughts, something that you would like to inject into this conversation, we encourage you to dial in, check, click the link and offer a question to the group. So with that said, let's get started into the conversation. And while we just explained the Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative has a solid infrastructure made up of some real meaningful and impactful work streams focused on these specific areas, all with the goal to eradicate systemic racism. If you could choose or change or offer any bold idea to eliminate systemic racism, what would it be? Again, no innovation, no innovative idea, no dream is too great, no plan or budget too large. What bold idea would you offer to address today's issues facing racism? And Jaylen, I'm going to start with you. Tell us what your thoughts would be, and be bold and be honest.
You're going to start with me?
Yes, we're going to start with you.
No, so for me, off the bat, I would say challenge the system. And I say that because it starts with education. Curiosity killed the cat for a reason. So how can we make life as we know it, life as we knew it? So for me, it's educational programming, addressing Black history in a way that is inclusive to America's history, not conducive to check off during Black History Month. Understanding what Black history is and the effects it has on today's world. And it brings me to Carter G. Woodson, a quote that he quoted in his book, The Miseducation of a Negro. A Negro has finished education in our schools. He is equipped to begin life as a quote unquote Americanized or Europeanized white man. Brings my attention back to the Emancipation Proclamation, and where we as a people were nominally free, but still economically and mentally enslaved. So what can our work as the DRJC, how can we address this in a bold way? I would say educate in a way that's true to America's history and not worrying about people's feelings getting hurt, not trying to, shy away from hurting feelings, but the harsh, it's hard. It's going to be hard conversations. It's going to be tough, but the harsh truth, educating our society, our community, our kids, our professionals, our educators about what America has, went through and why we are where we are today. So this is why we fight for equity and not equality.
Fantastic. Thank you. Wow. Now we're just getting started. It's early. Thank you, Jaylen. That was a fantastic answer. And Jacob, we're going to go over to you. I think it's important to hear, the voice of that next generation. And I know both of you and Tarai will be coming to you as well to really understand, your view. So Jacob, talk to us.
Yeah, I really like what Jaylen just said about education. I think education is key, especially since we should, I believe that investing in our future of our country is definitely key if we want to eliminate something that has just been instilled in our country for years. I would also mention criminal justice reform as well. Obviously, we need reform in just about every level systemically. But with criminal justice, we can establish trust between our community and our law enforcement through community policing tactics. We could also mandate body-worn cameras to police officers to hold law enforcement accountable. And also civilian review boards, I believe, are would be a big step in the right direction for Delaware as well, with the powers to subpoena as well.
Okay, good. You got real specific on us, but I mean, what you're saying is right on target, and we're having it as a part of a lot of our conversations as well. So Taraya, tell us your thoughts. Bold ideas.
I'm sorry.
Bold ideas.
Yes, I would definitely piggyback off of what Jaylen and Jacob said. And generally just holding the system of white supremacy accountable, ensuring that all students have equitable funding, access to resources that will truly ensure that they are able to perform to the best of their ability. Because as we know that many students that lack, these inequitable resources are the ones, that are unfortunately fall victim to the inequities within education. Black students that disproportionately are affected by the school to prison pipeline, or Black and brown students that statistically perform lower on standardized testings and et cetera because of their lack of resources. And I would definitely say that and make sure that teachers of color specifically are being represented within the classroom, within administration, on these boards. And then just having more services to ensure that all students have access to, and for example, like post-secondary high school education, and make sure that they can actually afford it. And my personal favorite is to continue to amplify the voices of students, have these students in these conversations as you guys are doing today with representing me, and then just more, and to have a variety of students and honoring, really listening to and honoring student voices on multiple levels, on all levels, and not just one, have multiple, and to continue creating space for students. And like I said, most importantly, just holding the system of white supremacy accountable for all the harm that it continues to perpetrate within our communities.
Wow, fantastic, and great point. In fact, as you talk about students and the education system, I immediately went and thought about Cliff and his work in our school system. So Cliff, why don't you tell us your views, as it relates, to, again, bold ideas with the intent of making a difference?
So going bold, for me, going bold would first start with changing the structure and the way that we fund education in America, public education in America. No longer will we rely on property taxes, because we know and understand that property taxes are just a way to continue to perpetuate the disparity in communities based on wealth, right? It continues to create this gulf between haves and have-nots. And we know that if education is where it starts, then we know that's where our major investment should be. Further, on the educational tip, what I would do is I would change the way in which our salary structure is in Delaware. The difference between district to district, and we have way too many school districts, but the difference from district to district creates competition within the state. That is where we're already competing for talented educators from our neighboring jurisdictions. And the neighboring jurisdictions, their salaries are so competitive that it almost makes our market a secondary market. So we have to address that. And then the final thing that I would do is I would create something that I call, for you 80s folks, right, who used to see the A-team, I would create academic intervention teams, right? I would have several in the state. Each one would have an embed administrator. It would have embed paraprofessionals, and it would have embedded certified teachers. And I'd be able to deploy these teams to schools that are underperforming, or schools that have been identified as being troubled schools, to be able to go in for a year at a time and increase performance, not just of the students, because too much attention is based on student performance, but also for the educators in those buildings. And then finally, I would make it so educators who teach in buildings where performance has been historically low receive bonuses to ensure that our educators that are in our schools that are in most need are there and motivated to do well.
Wow, fantastic. Thanks, Cliff. And we certainly understand, again, that focus on education and preparing that next generation of leaders and the next generation of workforce. And Pat, I'll tell you right away, when he talked about the 80s crowd, I knew that he was talking about a few of us on this call here. So Pat, I'm going to lean into you now. You tell me, a bold idea on making a difference, addressing this issue of racism.
Well, cool. And yeah, I'm very 80s and very old. So, I think part of what makes us bold is to be able to have multi-generational conversations. That's really, really important. We're learning from Jaylen and Jacob and Tariah. And that's where the power of this collaborative comes in, is by harnessing the power of youth to make that happen. But I do think, we've set up work streams and areas that we're focused on for a reason, because education clearly is important, but keeping kids in school is also very important. And that requires making sure that we address health inequities, making sure that we address police reform, and making sure that kids can feel safe. And, it is so varied that it's becoming a challenge, even as we look at what COVID has done to the education system and caused all of these gaps. We have to double down on that, because I think over the next few years, we won't see what the real impact of COVID and how it has disproportionately affected kids of color has made. And it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort to address all that. I would just say that from a bold perspective, I believe in this collaborative. I believe in how organically everybody came together after that tragic death of George Floyd, and grew to 200 different people and organizations across Delaware. That's amazing. That's bold. And what I would love to see is that this be successful and replicated in every city in the U.S., because the United Way structure, I think, is pervasive over the United States, and there's opportunities. I know that we're already talking with other United Ways in other cities about how this work is coming together. And wouldn't it be great if we were all successful? I think it can happen.
Fantastic. Thanks, Pat. Thanks. Now, Dr. Calvin Christopher, tell me your thoughts, bold ideas in addressing racism.
Very simply, Rick, I kind of look at systemic racism as a cancer. And I think that information and knowledge is really the best medicine. And to that end, I would boldly challenge and require all Delaware schools offer a financial literacy course beginning at the elementary school level. So all Black and brown kids will have the same access to that same information, with the intent of closing that wealth gap. Because I think it's impossible to talk about eradicating racism without talking about economics.
Agreed. Right on target. Right on target. And Shelley, to you, your thoughts.
Everything that everyone is saying about education is spot on. I'm going to pivot and take us to a different direction. And I think that's the responsibility of our business community. I have been working closely with a lot of the businesses throughout central Delaware, but also statewide. And what I am finding is that people want to do better. The majority of the people want to do better, but I think they need the resources and the expertise and the best practices to know what that looks like, because it's different for every organization. I think we need to create safe places for people to have uncomfortable conversations, so that we can get things out on the table that haven't been out before, and be able to move past and address the issues that haven't been addressed in the past.
Fantastic. And the business community plays an important part to all of this. And oftentimes what we've seen in the Delaware community, particularly, with the strong corporate presence that we have, not only in the northern part of the state, but quite honestly, across the state, where the business community leads, the community will follow. And now I have to tell you, I'm not going to answer, many of these questions, but this one, I really felt compelled, and I have to lean in on this one because you've said some great things. But for me, I think, we've when you think about all of the ideas and the thoughts that we've shared across the table with these amazing group of panelists, thought leaders, quite honestly, there's one group that we really have to highlight and show some attention to and make sure they understand the importance of their role. And that is our government leaders, both elected officials as well as our appointed and policymakers that work across the state. I don't think that we've been bold enough as we think about the range of candidates that are responsible for representing all of us. The idea that, and again, I want to make sure that my statistics are correct, we've never had a Black gubernatorial candidate, nor have we had a Black governor. So someone that's never even pursued the highest office in our state, who quite honestly plays a key role in addressing a lot of the things that we talked about today. So making sure that we have, again, the right candidate, right, to run for that very important and the highest office, at least in this state, that makes impacts on, all the citizens of Delaware. And then we have those other roles, whether it be, our state level elected officials in the General Assembly, House and Senate, making sure that we have the right folks leaning into those roles. And we have a dynamic group at that organization. The General Assembly is becoming more and more diverse with each election cycle that goes by. And I think it's important that not only when we think about diversity, we also think about gender, we also think about age, and quite honestly, social economics. And again, the conversation that we're having today is race, making sure that the racial dynamic of those people that are making decisions that affect all of us looks like the makeup of our state. So Shelley, I'm going to come back to you. And we're going to talk about, some of our life's journeys have been longer than others, some shorter than others. Nonetheless, each of our experiences is different, yet they're all very, very valuable. In your perspective, point to a moment or highlights and challenges of issues that issues of race in America in our community that you've witnessed or that you're familiar with. And please explain to us, why you believe they're meaningful to you.
So I've certainly witnessed things in the past that made me uncomfortable and that I knew was wrong. But I never took an active position until the series of high-profile events that took place during COVID. And I don't know whether it was a combination of what was happening with being trapped in our house, with COVID, and being able to just focus and see again and again and again what was happening in our nation and in our community. But I was able to put my children's face on what was happening to people. And that was the moment that I said, I have to find a way to get involved. And for me, I initially didn't understand what my role would be. I wrote a check because I thought, I don't know, I'll write a check. And then I read some books and I thought, that's my role. And then from there, I started having conversations with my book club. That was where we had a conversation. And then I joined this committee. And from there, I recognized that my voice as a white woman in this country, it is important that I can't be, to Jacob's point earlier, on the sideline and watch what's happening. I have to take an active position and use my position to try to influence change. And what I saw very quickly was that there are a lot of people who want to do the same thing, but they don't know how. And the DRJC has been an incredible outlet to be able to connect people who want to be able to start making a difference. And so now we are having conversations with the business leaders in Central Delaware, as an example. And I'm seeing them go back into their businesses and make policy changes and make changes that are whether they're taking a CEO pledge or they're changing how they're doing things in the workplace, or they're recognizing the fact that they need to start promoting from within. I am at my own small level starting to see where we can move the needle and how critical it is that we get off the sideline and we figure out what our role is to be able to make an impact. So.
Fantastic. And involved you have been. And I guess just to highlight, I think it's important for folks to know that, your leadership role with one of the state's most influential business organizations that's, running, again, leading from the center of our state, Kent County, and across the state, quite honestly, has been invaluable. So we thank you for your leadership and helping to drive business leaders, again, and challenging them to make a role. We appreciate you, and I just thought it was important to highlight that point.
I'm honored to be a part of it. I am embarrassed it took me so long to do so. So thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Soraya, a moment in time that was meaningful to you.
Yeah, I would definitely say I've always been very aware of the role that race played, within my life and how I was treated as a dark-skinned Black girl in very white-dominated spaces from elementary school to my high school. I've always been in predominantly white schools. So I was always aware of, the fact that I was treated differently because I was a dark-skinned Black girl in these spaces. But I would definitely say I haven't always been outspoken as I am now and unapologetic about the way that I navigate these spaces until I just was tired. Specifically within my high school, I began advocating for a Black student union and I was being told no. And I just got tired of being told no. And I'm just like, okay, so it's gonna take me to be more bold about the way that I approach these situations. And then I just continue to be bold in the way that I rock my afro or the way that I walk into these rooms or log into these Zoom screens to just continue being bold about the way that I fight and push for change, whether it's within education or criminal justice reform, just to be more bold about, the way I navigate these spaces.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. And I think, we're all inspired, by just, again, the next generation of leaders. We see you, we recognize, we hear your voice. And again, we're all inspired by it. Pat, I'm going to go to you. Tell me, is there a moment in time, an experience that you've had? Is there something that's occurred that, points to your value for wanting to be engaged and to make a difference in this?
Yeah, I think mine's a little different, but it was my daughter was bullied in high school because she's gay, and the high school that she went to was very a lot of privilege. Let me just put it that way. There's a lot of privilege in that school, and she just didn't fit in. And so that, in that moment, I started to pay more attention to kids like her, right? And it's not just it's gender equity, it's racial equity, it's across the board. There's a lot of discrimination, and that raised my awareness a lot. And then when I had the chance to come to DuPont and work in the city of Wilmington with all of you amazing people and on these issues that really have affected the city and the state for so long, just remembering that, I can help make a difference. That's what really drives me. And when as Shelley said, when these events happened this summer, I couldn't sit still. And that's how I got involved as well. And it took me a little bit longer than I would have wanted it to get involved, but I'm here to do whatever I can and rally the companies and the corporations and the chamber and everybody who can contribute, whether it's financially or with people and our employee resource groups and volunteers to take this on. That's what this is going to take, is not just, looking to government, not just looking to the nonprofit sector. Companies have to step up, and I think there's a lot we can do. I got a little off topic, Rick, from your question, but that's how it started for me, and boy, is it, it's real, and I think I'm happy that, at least, from a silver lining perspective, that I was awakened at some point to this kind of, the kind of discrimination that just really affected our family, and I just want to make it right for a lot of people. I want to see what difference I can make.
Jaylen, I was going to lean in on. I see you leaning into the camera on this one, but I said, you know what? We're going to move to the next question. I want to ask you a little bit about the Delaware Way, and it has had a long-standing positive image, right, on how our state's been able to, has been quoted as being able to do productive work, whether it be in government, business, or within our nonprofit communities. Tell me your thoughts and perceptions about the Delaware Way, and share a few thoughts, if you have any, kind of about a new way.
So just an understanding that because Delaware is a small and diversified state, we do mirror a lot of America as a whole. So the Delaware Way, we're able to do a lot more, I feel, in our state, because whether it's issues, whether it's research, data collection, it's more manageable with us being such a small state. However, with that being said, I think a lot of us, and speaking collectively in organizations that fight for change, when we compare success rates, we utilize Delaware numbers and get a confidence that shouldn't be as high, because we have to understand that Delaware is small. So with our numbers being compared to larger states, with some of them being similar in number, this is, Delaware compared to somewhere as big as like Texas. So it's an even bigger problem in Delaware because we're such a small state. So I think when it comes to a new way, just understanding Delaware as a scope of Delaware. So when we're addressing Delaware problems, let's hit it head on and not use comparisons to states like Texas or Alabama, just because it offsets our numbers when we're looking at success rates. So in a nutshell, yeah.
Okay, good. Cliff, thoughts on the Delaware Way?
So the same things that make you laugh are the same things that make you cry. That's what my elders taught me. The same things that make the Delaware Way great are the same things that make it terrible. It's about networking is what it really comes down to. And for those individuals who sit at those tables where power is divvied up like slices of pie, the system works tremendously for them. For those people who are excluded and the people who are watching from the window while these other people eat and participate in the process, the system works terribly. The Delaware Way has to become more inclusive. You said yourself that we've never had a African-American, I don't even recall a minority candidate for the gubernatorial spot. Yet African-Americans consistently, particularly in Newcastle County, drive our local elections. That goes back and speaks to who's sitting at the table where power is being divvied. The Delaware Way is great. I'm not gonna underscore it, right? Because it does show you people, they do reach across the aisle, right? And it also shows you that people who come from different walks of life, if they're invited into that exclusive room, get things done. We just have to do a better job of widening the net and bringing more people in.
Fantastic. And Calvin, any thoughts on the Delaware Way? And Shelley, I know you had a particular interest in this one. Then we have some questions from the audience that I want to point to that are going to be good, and I'll pose that to the entire group. But Kevin, what are your thoughts? You know the Delaware Way. You've seen it in action.
Yeah, and similar to what Clifton mentioned, being a small state has its advantages and its disadvantages. You can bring powerful people together very, very quickly to make some very, very important decisions. However, those who are not part of that decision-making process is the part that is very, very, very troubling. So particularly, you can make some very, very important decisions that have an unintentional disparate impact on a lot of people that are affected by that. So the only way to mitigate that is making sure that you have the diversity of thought involved in those decisions.
Fantastic. Well, good. Hey, so we have a question from our audience that I think it's important that we can kind of put out. This is very targeted, very specific, and I'll place it out to the entire group of panelists here. And it says, please address the new Jim Crow in Delaware. African Americans make up about 60% of the prison population in Delaware, but the state's African American population is only about 22%, according to most recent census data. So let's talk a little bit about how is it and why is it that our, the African American, the Black population of Delaware's prison systems is so high. Anyone want to respond to that one?
Now, because I did spend substantial time as an administrator in the criminal justice realm here in Delaware, I will first and foremost say that Delaware's, the new Jim Crow in Delaware, it's the same as it is everywhere else. But it's a little different from the standpoint of you get a lot of the industrial prison complex in other places because they have privatized prisons. We don't have that in Delaware. I think what drives this disparate number of folks from minority communities being incarcerated is the amount in which they're contacted by law enforcement. If you're contacting folks at increased rates, you're going to get more arrests. Example, they don't patrol Madison Street the same way they patrol streets in Hockessin. That doesn't mean that people smoke weed or marijuana any less in Hockessin than they do on Madison Street. But if you're policing Madison Street at the rate that they do, you're going to get more arrests. And we know that our communities largely are segregated, right? It's just an unfortunate truth. I think that it starts with our policing strategies. And I'm not downing police. I'm just saying you get what you look for, right? You over police, you're going to get more arrests. So I'll let other folks jump in.
Any other thoughts? Great response.
Clifton, you're absolutely right. And I learned that one of the most powerful positions within that whole law enforcement is the police officer, because that's where you are introduced into the criminal justice system from the very beginning.
Jacob, it looked like you had a thought.
I was just going to say the over-policing is key. That's exactly what I was thinking when Cliff was saying that. It's just over-policing in those areas, and that's exactly why the numbers are so high.
Okay, we have another question that I want to point to from our audience here, and this one talks about addressing how we rebuild Delaware's middle class through trade. And also focusing on youth relations and alternatives, and how do we prepare the next generation of leaders to go to college or to the armed services or to do something productive that will help us close the wealth gap. So this one talks about engaging the next generation of workforce, the next generation of leaders. What is it that we can be doing? Any thoughts about that?
I think one thing that we can do is to take a look at where are the opportunities in our businesses. Where is there a shortage of a workforce, and try to match training with the opportunities of hiring in our companies, match that with the educational institutions so that people can get jobs. And then we need to make sure that it's not just focused on college, it's certifications or whatever type of, however we can to match the opportunities in our community with the jobs that are needed. And I don't necessarily think we need to put all force on college. I think there's a lot of different ways for us to make sure that our workforce needs are being met in the community.
So I'm going to pose that even more specifically to our next generation of leaders, which we have a few here on this call. Taraya, Jacob, Jaylen, what is it that the next generation believes that you need in order to support your success? What do you need? What can, whether it be government, business, community leaders, nonprofit, what can we do to ensure your generation's success?
A seat at the table. That's number one.
Exactly.
That was easy. I like that.
That's the number one answer for me, to be honest. I had to work, diligently 2 years through networking. Cuts in pay, making like $500 every 2 weeks, getting off work, going to this training, researching this workshop just to get in this space that I'm in today. I've been in organizations where I'd had the academic and the experience qualifications to run certain programs, but my age was a barrier for me. I've been told by supervisors, you're just too young to lead people that are older than you, or what they call vets. So I appreciate spaces like the United Way of Delaware that entrust youth as leaders and the experience and the suggestions and the bandwidth that they can bring to the collaborative. Just being in these spaces, understanding that we are the future, in order to even start to remotely, come up with solutions for a future, you have to include those that are going to be present in that time. So we have a different perspective, we have a different experience, we have a different outlook on life, even with racism itself. And not only that, allowing us to be us. Delaware just passed a Crown Act that allows us not to be discriminated because of our afro or our braids, but our hair or our dreads, but allowing us to be unapologetically ourselves and not having to, feel like because my name is Jaylen and not Jessica, I might not get a call back, So little things like that, it starts within the workplace as well. And as leaders, as CEOs, as hiring managers, understanding that these youth are just as much qualified as some of your vets, if not more.
Right, I see you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I also wanted to add, it's important to give these, students and youth seats at the table, but then also to let them lead through a lens of being authentic and letting them lead not to appease you, but to lead in the lens that, like I said, they can be the most authentic as possible. Because for me, who I always joke that I'm a recovered token. For me, that was a student that was tokenized and only used just to be like, okay, we have our student, but never really heard, never really saw action behind, the words that I spoke, or really action reflective of the time that I spent at these tables. So having actions to support the voices that, you're hearing and supposedly listening to.
Great.
Yeah, and I would just say too, just in the stigma that age is definitive of your ability to carry out tasks of a job, and like Tarai and Jaylen just said, just give us a seat at the table. Don't stop trying to do the same old, and look for newer options, newer ideas, and that starts with our youth. Like I said earlier, just you have to invest in our future, and we are the future.
Hey, Rick, I'd like to jump in too. I agree with everything you said, and two things. One is I think leadership needs to be nurtured, especially in middle school and early high school. I think we need to do a better job of making kids feel like they can be themselves, making kids, exposing kids to leadership at an earlier age. I think that drives civic leadership. Ultimately, it drives generational change. But I also think it's kind of on companies to remember that we're not just hiring college graduates. We're not just hiring PhDs. I think sometimes the focus and the investment is that's where that goes. I think we need to think about giving kids a choice when they get to high school graduation, whether it's trade school, whether it's a certificate, whether it's the military, as long as they have choices, we will create more wealth, we will create more generational wealth, and ultimately we'll be able to better address systemic and institutional racism because of wealth.
Hey, Rick. Hey, Rick, I also wanted to just address a comment to the future leaders here. When you guys are in these spaces and people tell you're too young to lead older people, you got to push back. There's no age requirement on leadership. Leadership is a quality, right? And either you have it or you don't. That quality does not come with prerequisites that include age. It's your ability to lead people. Does your voice motivate people? Does your voice uplift people? Then people will follow you. You will be able to lead people. And none of that has anything to do with your age.
Fantastic. Great comment. Great comment. And I'm watching the clock here. We have a couple of things that we want to get to, but I think it's important. One, I want to highlight the activity that occurred that we saw in the spring through the protest activity that was occurring with Black Lives Matter, not only in Washington, but across the country, but most notably in our nation's capital. And we saw the activity that occurred there that resulted in a number, hundreds. In fact, I saw the most recent data piece was over 600 folks were arrested in Washington, D.C. during the Black Lives Matter protest activity. And just a few weeks ago, we saw, again, another group of protesters who wanted to stand for their position, and whether it be QAnon or white supremacy or Trump supporters, however you describe it, that protest turned into a storming of our nation's capital, the actual facility while our elected officials, our Congress people were there making a decision, handling the work of the people. How do you reconcile the idea that there were only, there was another report that there was just roughly about 100, little over 100 arrests, and largely those were made of curfew violations and minor citations. So Jaylen, I know this was some interest to you. Tell us, how do you reconcile this disparity that was so glaringly obvious into the country, but it's clearly now that both events are over, we have to kind of live with it. How do we reconcile it?
So my answer is you don't, okay? And to reconcile is to restore or coexist in harmony. And my response to that is we need to revolutionize. And I think a lot of people get negative connotation and misconception of what a revolution is, and it's literally just change. It's change radically and fundamentally. That's it. And because I know we're on time, I'll end with this by Fred Hampton. You can kill the revolutionary, but you cannot kill the revolution. So you don't reconcile. We have to stop being okay with things we are not okay with. We have to acknowledge that it's a problem, and we are not going to continue to be okay and hiding in the shadows and not voicing our opinions and not standing up for ourselves. So start a revolution. But no, that's it.
That's it. You've said nothing wrong. In fact, that was very right. I appreciate that. Fantastic. And Calvin, I have one for you. And we're going to stay in DC. We're going to keep the conversation kind of focused in and around DC, and recognizing that we have a new administration. We have our first vice president that's elected as a Black woman, Asian American woman, as a vice president. We have Delaware's own, one of our favorite sons, as he's so often described, as the president, President Joe Biden, right here from Delaware. That's significant. We talked about the importance of public policy and having leaders, in place. What do we expect because of the presence in this renewed administration will change for us as Black Americans?
That's a very interesting question, because that question came up like 8 years ago when Barack Obama was president as well, and there were certain levels of expectations that were set then. And here you have a president who, as a vice president, served under the first African-American president. And you have a current president now who was bold enough to appoint a Black vice president. I think there is a huge support base out there that does not like this at all. I think there are some folks who, just because of the president's age, he could potentially be a one-term president, which places a Black female in queue to become the president of the United States. I think we have seen that there's a large base that certainly does not like that. As it relates to expectations, I think it would be unfair to place high expectations on Vice President Harris or even President Biden, because they have to work with legislators. We're not going to program ourselves out of this systemic racism. We have to have policy change. In order to do that, you're going to have to work with people who are very, very opposed to a lot of your views and a lot of things that you want to do. So while I'm hopeful, while we have some people who are now leading our country that have the vision, that have the best interest in mind of ours, I'm also cautious not to place a lot of expectation unfairly on Vice President Harris because she happens to be African American or even Joe Biden because he happens to be here in Delaware.
Fantastic answer. Anyone else have any thoughts? Cliff, I see you.
I expect that we get a return on investment.
Okay.
I expect that we will stop celebrating firsts and we will celebrate firsts who get things done for us.
Fantastic. We're going to end on that note right there, right? With that question. That was fantastic, Cliff. I hear you. Expect. I like that. And stop celebrating firsts until we celebrate firsts and accomplishments. Oh, yeah, I wrote that one down. I'm going to give you credit the first few times I use it. But then, no, I'll tell you what, as we're looking at the clock here, I do want all of our panelists, in a word or two, just to think about the Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative. Our long-term vision is to end systemic racism in Delaware. If there was one thing, okay, we're going to try to keep these kind of short and succinct, if at all possible. If there was one thing that the collaborative could do tomorrow to move towards making radical change or addressing a real issue as it relates to eradicating racism, what would that one thing be? Shelley, I'm looking at you. What are your thoughts?
I think we need to have more people involved. I think that the more people that get involved, the faster we can move the needle. So I think we need people to sign up. Fantastic.
Patrick, I'm going to come to you next. Pat, what do you think?
I can't argue with that. That's exactly right. The strength of the collaborative as it stands today is because of all the talent that has decided to join, whether you're part of a work stream or a supporter, it doesn't matter. We just need everybody to support this effort. That's what's going to move the needle.
Fantastic. Thanks, Pat. One thing, Tara.
Yeah, echoing what Shelley and Patrick said, just, honoring the fact that there's power in numbers, getting more brains in on addressing, the problem and the disease of systemic racism, and obviously getting more youth involved, a diverse group of youth, and as much as possible, honestly, and just adhering to the voices of youth.
Fantastic. Jacob, I'm coming to you. What are your thoughts?
I definitely echo what the previous three said. Also, I would say that since criminal justice is a big, a big part that's important to me, I would say addressing LEABOR, the Officers' Bill of Rights. I think that would be something that a lot of people don't really like to talk about on, a top level conversation, but I think that that's what needs to be addressed.
Fantastic. Jaylen, one thing.
I agree with everyone. I would just say my one thing is just what the DRJC has been doing, and that's leading by example. And I'll end with a quote from Amanda Gorman's poem. There's always light, right? If we were only brave enough to see it, if we were only brave enough to be it. So be that light.
Be the light. I like that. All right, Cliff, then Calvin, we're going to wrap it up. Any thoughts? I mean, that was awesome.
Simply for the DRJC to continue to be a megaphone to lift the voices of the people who are systemically quiet.
Fantastic. Calvin, final word.
Rick, I would say, expand the effort. I saw what we have been able to do in a relatively short period of time with the effort that we have, and I see a lot more potential in expanding the effort and even doing a lot more over the coming years.
Fantastic. Hey, well, thank you all. Thank you all to the panelists for sharing your thoughtfulness and sharing your open ideas and your feelings and really expressing yourself. This was a fantastic and an amazing conversation. I look forward to continuing and having another installment of this conversation. This was great. I also like to thank the viewing audience. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope you all had value for the discussion. Again, we're looking forward to doing this again. And I know there were some questions that came up in the chat, and we're hopeful your name is attached to it. And maybe there's a way that we can find a way to get back to you with those. I want to encourage you to do a couple things. One of the responses was to that last question was getting involved. We're going to encourage folks, get involved if you're interested. Find a way to engage in one of our work streams. They're all working to make a real impact and a real difference. So we thank you all. We're going to encourage you, one, also to participate in our 5-day equity challenge. Okay, we have these equity challenges that are going up that are encouraging folks and stirring up thoughts, encouraging you to get involved, encouraging to have questions, be inquisitive, right? And all those things are part of the process of making things better and addressing the racial justice and equity issues that we're all been facing. So again, we thank you all. We encourage you to consider contributing to the Delaware Racial Justice, our Equity Fund, to help us continue to do this important work. And lastly, but not least, again, to our panelists today, you all have been phenomenal. This was fun. I look forward to doing this again. I thought we had a great conversation, and this conversation will not end. So again, thank you, and we'll sign up on that. You all have a great evening as we prepare for a safe weekend. Take care all, and thank you.